Thanks, Bree. So, good morning, everybody. So, I got to meet a lot of you as you guys were filing in the room. Just want to get like a show of hands because I know everybody's at different points. So, how many are currently leading people? Okay. How many are aspiring to lead people? Okay. Got a few people. And raise those hands up proud and high. It's like, that's okay. And how many maybe came, you've been supervising for so long, maybe you just need a reset or you want a refresher. So some people are here for that too, they mentioned. So with that, what I want to do is just start with the objectives. And this is what I hope to accomplish today is for everybody to get an understanding of the common challenges and changes when you transition. I was telling some of you that I wish there was a class when I was first becoming a supervisor because, oh boy, did I make some really big mistakes. I'll share a couple of my stories. And hopefully I can help you prevent those. And then just understand the importance of those key relationships and some things you can do to develop it. And then be able to describe ways to develop yourself. I mean, I think it's great the chamber offers these type of classes, but you might work in a company where they don't have, it's not a big company, they don't have formal training. So I'm going to talk a lot about how you can develop yourself and different resources that I think could be really helpful. So the leadership journey, how many miles, how do you know when you've arrived? How do you know when you're arrived? Where's your end point? I'm looking for participation this morning too. You may never get there, and why? Yep, based on successes, I like that. Yeah, to me, leadership is just a lifelong journey. I've been at it for a really long time. I led global teams. I led people on the front line. There's always, in my opinion, something to learn. And I love to learn. So I don't think we're ever quite there. And I think it's important to be a self-learner. So what is one key learning that you really get to make this class worthwhile for you? What would you like to have discussed today? Bree's going to help me try to remember all these things. Anybody just, what's going to make the class worthwhile? What are you hoping that we're going to cover?
Make you a better leader. Be able to react to your peers.
React to your peers, make you a better leader. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Latrice?
Confidence and leadership.
Confidence and leadership. We're definitely going to cover that. Anything else that's really going to make it worthwhile for you today? Yep, in the back.
Leading older generation
That's a good one.
from a younger perspective.
Yeah, oh boy, do I have a story for you on that one.
So to help maybe some of the people that I'm currently working with to step up into a leadership role.
Okay. Yeah, because it can be kind of scary. Let's face it. It's not, a lot of people, when you're asking them, what do you want to do next? Like, I don't know if I want to be a leader. I mean, everybody's a leader. You lead yourself. But leading other people, for some people, that seems kind of frightening. And at times it can be, too. So how about anything else? Okay. So what do you anticipate the challenge? And let's hear from some of the people that haven't been leaders yet. What do you anticipate some of the challenges of a first-time leader?
Setting boundaries.
Boundaries. Yep, that's a great one. What else?
First confrontation.
First confrontation. Yeah, there's going to be some. Yep. So for those of you who are already leading, what is your top challenge, if you're willing to share it? Yes.
Going from a friendship to a leadership role.
Yep, and we're going to focus on that a lot today. Moving from friendship to a leadership role really can be tough. Yes?
Having the hard discussions without, ruining the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Having those tough discussions. Nobody really enjoys them, but one thing I've learned the hard way is when you ignore a problem, it never gets smaller. How about anybody else? Anything? Okay, so I think we're going to cover most of those. So this is just some common mistakes, and they're not in any particular order of importance, but, failing to define the goals. We're going to talk about communication today and how important it is to have clarity in your communication. not delegating. When you move, let's say you did the job and now you're moving to the leader, and sometimes you want to jump in, really hard to let go. Misunderstanding motivation. Not everybody wants to move up. So when you're having discussions and finding out what your team wants to do, find out what their motivations are. Not providing feedback. Some people have told me, and what I do on the side is coaching and training after I retired, and a lot of people that I'm talking to, they don't get feedback. So one of the things that a lot of coaches do is 360 feedback. So you ask people that you lead, people that are your peers, people above you, how's that person doing? What would you like them to start doing, stop doing, keep doing? What makes them a great leader? But so many times we don't get feedback, and when you're in HR, half the time you don't even get a performance feedback, because I don't know why our bosses forget us, right? And then micromanagement, ineffective or just lack of communication, which can happen. You might tend to gravitate towards the people who are your former friends and leave the others out. And then maybe focusing on the processes too much besides the people. And inconsistency is a big one. People are going to be watching you way more carefully. They're going to have a different lens on you when you become a supervisor. And then maybe rushing into recruitment or trying to do too much when you get first named as a supervisor. And this is another survey from people who are already leaders, what their top challenges are. And you've got them on your slide set, but this Center for Creative Leadership is a company that's pretty well known for their training, and they do global training. And so they've got a lot of data, and it's really adjusting to people management. I mean, let's face it. How many people in here have kids? Oh, a lot of you. Are kids easy? I mean, we're just taller versions of them. So, I mean, we are complex. People are complex. And so we really need to, find out how to manage effectively and displaying authority. Sometimes when you're a new leader, you may go towards being a little bit, I got to show my power, or like the situation that we talked about back there about when you're supervising people that are a lot older than you. That can be really tough. When I was 30, I was named manager of labor relations, and I was pretty excited about the job till the first day I got there, and my peer had put my announcement on my chair with a note that said this was supposed to be my chair. Like, whoa. I mean, he had been around for a while. He thought that chair should have been his. We did work that out over time. In fact, on my LinkedIn profile, he probably wrote one of the nicest recommendations I ever got. But it was like, wow, did I make a mistake leading this group? That same group, because they were so much more experienced, the safety director stopped me in the hall after about, I'd been there maybe 10 days, and said, I want to ask you a question. He said, are you used to working with a bunch of idiots? And I said, why would you ask me that question, Larry? And he said, well, because you're always looking over our shoulder. You're always checking on what we're supposed to do. And to me, I thought that's what, I was a new manager. I had to have my hands on everything. He like, he said, we know how to do our jobs, just back off. So that group of people taught me a lot about being a leader. But boy, were those some talk about hit yourself up the side of the head. That was a aha moment for me. But, it's just that personal effectiveness. We're all really unique individuals. I've seen lots of leaders who have a certain style that are effective and people who have the opposite style. So how many in the room are introverts? You feel like you're an introvert? Raise your hands high. Be proud, because you know what? Most CEOs are introverts, and you know why? Because a lot of times they're better listeners. So don't put yourself down for that. I happen to be an extrovert on the side of extrovert. And, sometimes we just need to listen more. Shut our mouths and listen more. Developing your own effectiveness and what works for people. And just watching people, sometimes you can get a sense of whether or not they're tuned into you or if they've just shut you out. And just, leading team achievement, because why we want to pay attention to the people side, we're probably selected for that position because we need to get the job done. There's goals and achievements. So those are some of the top ones, and then just managing internal stakeholders in politics. We could have a whole nother class on that, but we won't focus too much on that today. But motivation of others, I think, is a important one in performance management. So let's go on. Leaders are made, not born. I'm a big football fan. My son-in-law happens to be a coach in the NFL, and I'm kind of football crazy. My husband's like, why would you give a football example? Not everybody likes football. But I think there's a lot of leadership lessons in football because they really do have to play as a team to achieve their goals. But Vince Lombardi, who was famous coach of the Green Bay Packers, if you look up Vince Lombardi, he's got some pretty powerful leadership quotes. But I like the fact that he says, they're made by hard effort, which is the price all of us have to pay to achieve any goals. So leadership can be tough, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. I loved being a leader. It's, to me, very gratifying, but there's days when you kind of go, what was I thinking? I'm sure you've all had them because we have a lot of leaders currently in the room. So, congratulations on that new promotion. Let's just imagine you got that. You're really excited. You might be a little nervous, completely normal. I know CEOs, in fact, I was just coaching somebody who became a CFO for the first time, was moving to a new company. He said, I got to admit, I'm really nervous about this. I'm like, this is a person who's been working for 25 years. It is totally normal to be nervous. But you got to remember why you were selected. There was a person or group of people that believed in you, why you were selected. And so you really got to mind your self-talk. And what do I mean by that? What self-talk might be happening when it's your first day and you're walking in to address your new team? What might be going through your head? Doubt. What else? I heard some other. Can't handle this. Yep. Totally normal. But keep that positive self-talk because you were selected for this. People believed in you. You got to believe in yourself. This is many years ago, and we had this general manager who everybody was really excited. He was a younger person, quite a bit younger. He also, I am not sick, by the way. I just have allergies. So if anybody sees me with a Kleenex, I don't want anybody to be worried because I did shake hands with people. Strictly allergies. But he got on his first call. And it was a global call, very accomplished education-wise, bilingual. And most of the first portion of the call, he was putting himself down like, I'm really surprised I got this, blah, blah, blah. So the chitter-chatter after the people are instant messaging each other is like, whoa, hope he's up for the job. Boy, he didn't sound very confident. Wow, I didn't expect that kind of speech from him. So, you got to own it. So that self-talk needs to be positive. You need to own that because whatever you're saying, which in your head, your brain believes. So if you're just knocking yourself down and really doubting yourself, your brain's going to believe that and it's going to show. I think people get a sense of what that leader is attempting to portray. They're not going to be surprised if you're a little nervous, but if you're really like, wow, I don't know if I really deserve this, you're kind of setting yourself up for some tough and bumpy times. So own it. Be confident, not arrogant. So they're the two most important building blocks. And this is a book that I really like. It's called Bud to Boss. And I think Bree is going to be raffling one off for the class. But I use it a lot of times when I'm coaching people because it's got a great plan. It's got a really robust website. And for people that are new, maybe they don't have training that they could go to or mentors, it's a great resource that I like to use. But he talks a lot about the desire to succeed and the belief you can succeed. And the be confident, not arrogant, I saw one leader that I was working with when I was the HR director, he spent his whole first day setting up his office. Okay, it was really exciting. He got to move out of his cube to an office, but his people are sitting out there going, is he ever going to come out and talk to us? I mean, you got to pay attention. People are looking at what you're doing and what you are paying attention to. So how's your role going to change? Well, obviously, in many ways, but you represent the organization, mission, values. You represent your team to the organization. So one of the first things I think that might go through people's mind is like, when you first hear you get the promotion, is like, uh-oh. Now the people that I'm supervising, I used to eat lunch with, we used to talk about the boss. We used to talk about our other peers, and now I am the boss. So, there are going to be some changes because now you got a different relationship. And can you only imagine what the people that didn't get the promotion are thinking, oh boy, what did I say that he might remember that we said at lunch last week? Or, so everybody's a little bit nervous when that promotion happens. But it's up to you, really important to represent the company. So you might have said with your peers, well, I don't really agree with that policy. I don't like that. Well, now you have a different role. You're representing the company, and certainly you're going to disagree with things. I mean, that's totally natural, but do it in private with your boss. Because once you start sharing with your team that, oh, that policy's terrible, or I don't agree with that, that's going to change some dynamics that'll be hard to get back. That horse will be out of the barn. And then you represent your team. So, you are responsible for their output and contributions, but you're going to have to be able to earn their trust to be able to lead them effectively. So, obviously your former peers, new boss, you'll have new peers, people that, maybe weren't a peer that you need to establish relationships. It's another department that you work closely with. One of the things that I've seen people make mistakes, especially when I've been coaching people, is they're very protective of their team. Team loves them. Team of them go through that wall for them. But they badmouth their peers. They badmouth the other functions. Well, guess what? That doesn't set up that just goes downhill. That just trickles down to your team. So be careful what you're saying to your team. You're in a new role now. And I think that's important to remember. So how do you counteract some of those common problems? So we got a lot of people in the room. We got a few ideas up here. But what are some of the things that you did as you became a leader? I'm sure you saw some challenges ahead. Is there anything that you did? I mean, normally, there is an organization announcement. You might meet with your team, hold one-on-ones. There's probably going to be some people that are disappointed, like the guy that left the note on my chair that said it should have been his. And there's going to be people testing your authority. But what did you do that you look back on that was successful when you got your role? I know there's got to be a couple stories in here. You look like you have one. I can see it in your eyes.
This is a ways back, but when I was brought on, there was some undermining from the peer that I was brought on to supervise, and I was new to the company, so I didn't have a lot of history to fall back on, and I just had to just steer straight ahead and keep doing what I needed to do to kind of prove myself, and that kind of worked itself out, but it was painful for a while.
So is there anything that you can look back on that you did? I mean, did anything in a discussion with them, or that turned that around, or was it just a matter of time?
It wasn't so much with that person that I was supervising, because eventually they left.
Okay.
That was part of the solution, but it was more just building relationship with my other managers and other people so that they were able to understand who I was.
Okay. Yeah, and typically, they call it like the J line. There's going to be 60% that they're okay with the promotion. 20% might be cheerleaders. I knew they were going to get that job. They totally deserve it. And 20% that maybe aren't sure. They may not be like the people that you had undermine you, but they're kind of, this is going to be a wait and see. So, decide who you're going to focus your group. And it sounds like you focused on building relationships with the other people first, which worked for you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a story they'd like to share? Come on. Usually this happens with the group after lunch. You have sugar, you ate that donut, you should be pumped up.
I don't know, I do have, this was years ago in a different organization that I used to work with. And I too was put into a management position without any training. I was very young and naive, and I got into the department, and things were not real positive within the department. And there were a lot of things that were going on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're not doing the right things, or they're leaving early, or this is happening and this isn't happening. So I started to, as if not jump into discipline, but I wasn't quite sure what was going on and why this was all happening. So I too learned a great lesson, and the lessons that I learned was to build relationships, start off building relationships, listening, understanding your team and what they're going through. So I started to walk in their shoes.
Empathy.
Did some job shadowing, understood the issues they were having and why they were acting like they were acting. And one of the things I learned is that they didn't feel important at the time within the organization. Like, as if they lost what the mission was, the visions and the values of the organization. And so I started kind of like all over again. Let's start from the basics, why we're even here in this,
I love that.
Working. We talked about the mission a lot, the vision, and I brought them to a point where you are important to this organization. You're a major, play a major role within the organization, and I'm here to help you. Together we're going to be successful. And things just turned around, and I really focused on them, what they're doing, and their role within the organization, and how they can better serve the organization.
That's
And
great.
It really changed things. It took a while. It was very challenging in the beginning, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that position.
Yeah, and I think I found too that the most challenging positions I've been in, where things didn't go as smoothly, were the lessons I learned the most from. So it sounds like you did a great job of just stepping back and going to the basics. And that's what you have to do, is just assess what's going on. Maybe for those of you that are supervising older people, it's like, for me, the thing that kind of turned it around is I sat down with the guy who wanted my chair, and it's like, I thought he really could have had that chair, but he never finished his school. And for whatever reason at the time, General Motors said, you got to have a bachelor's degree. So I asked him, I saw you attended Ohio State. Is that okay to say in this state of Michigan? I grew up in Ohio. But I said, what happened that, you didn't finish? It's like, do you want to finish? We talked about that and put out a plan, because I said, Dave, there's no reason why you couldn't have this role. Take that off the table so people don't have a reason. And like I said, one of the most meaningful recommendations that I ever got on my LinkedIn, because it started out really rough. But just like you said, listening to the person, finding out what's behind, what's going on, and he felt overlooked and unappreciated. So I started giving him, some lead assignments. A lot of times the people that seem the most resistant, find out why just by having those discussions. What's going on with them? So the announcement, hopefully somebody makes a formal announcement. You don't have to make it yourself, but oftentimes that could help about, your boss making this announcement, what he's expecting of the team, kind of setting the stage. And then gives you a chance to define who you are as the leader. You got to really think through that. Do you want to be their peer, their friend, or you're going to be standing at the door? Somebody was sharing a story about the new leader would call to make sure, or make sure, because they had 2 different sites, make sure people weren't leaving early, so they were feeling, over micromanaged, and really rebelled against it. So we won't spend a lot of time on this, but boss communications is important in your new role. Find out what are their objectives and goals, and what support can you expect. I was talking to somebody this week who just got a promotion and said, okay, I haven't heard from my boss. This is like my first week in the job. And I said, well, why do you think that is? What might be happening? She said, I think they're actually trying to give me some space and not micromanage. And so when she reframed it, she felt okay about it. But the thing is when you do get into those leadership roles, a lot of times you don't hear from your bosses as much as you'd like to. Some of us would hear way more than we wanted to from our bosses. It just depends on your boss's style. And finding out how and when you should communicate. There was a gentleman that I was working with, and he's like, my CFO drives me crazy. She's always asking, do I have these assignments? I said, well, why do you think that is? Because her boss, the CEO, was always asking. So it's like, what can you do to satisfy her request but not feel like you're being micromanaged? He said, well, maybe I could do a better job of being proactive with information so I don't have to wait for her to ask, and, think about what might be key. So team communications, just like you were mentioning, expressing appreciation. What do they mean to the organization? I once had a job where the HR team was really, they didn't feel respected. They didn't get backed up. Their decisions got overturned. So we sat down and really brainstormed about what we could do as a team to turn that around. And we really did manage to turn the reputation around. So we were thought as a true partner to the organization. Ask them or share your views and expectations. And when you're having a one-on-one or team meeting, invite their help, their patience, because we're not going to know everything. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you don't know something. Stephanie, I know you have a stand up if you need to. I'm not trying to call you out, but I know you said you have a back issue. Feel free to stand. If anybody's uncomfortable, it's not going to bother me. And what's your communications cadence going to be? So how do you do formal communications? I mean, what's your philosophy on communications? For those of you that have been leaders for a while.
Depends on the context.
Okay.
If it's super serious, then more formal.
Okay.
If it's something that's not serious, it could be more informal.
Yep. I like that. Anybody else? Or even how it's done in your company. So context of the communication is really important. Acknowledge the change. I mean, there's nothing wrong because, like I said, you're both going to experience emotions about the change. And we don't like to talk about emotions and feelings, but I can tell you I coach a lot of men and they got feelings too. They're probably not going to admit it to everybody in a room full of people, but let's face it, we all have emotions and feelings about stuff. You might be really excited about the change. Your people that you're working for, you may not be, you don't know, but be curious about what they're feeling, and you can do that in a one-on-one. Ask open-ended questions. What's an open-ended question?
More than a yes and no, or
More than a yes and a no.
That was an open-ended question.
Yeah, so if you can get something out of them that's more than yes, no, so it's usually like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? How's this going for you? So on and so forth. So be curious about what they're feeling and don't take things personally. You're going to get talked about as the boss. Has anybody in here not talked about their boss at one point in their life? Anybody? If you held up your hand, I'd challenge you because I bet you might have had a discussion or two with a coworker. But you may walk in a room when you're a new supervisor and it's quiet all of a sudden. Yeah, they're probably talking about you. Or maybe it's just something else that they don't want you to, know about. But don't take it personally. It's natural. It's like if you have kids and you walk in a room and it goes silent, they're probably talking about mom or dad. It's like it happens. It's real life. So just shake it off. Don't take it personally, because if you focus on it, it's really going to get in your head. And clarity. Be really clear about, whether it be written or verbal. I like what your example about if it's really serious, let's do a more formal, maybe it's got to be in person. And explain the why. The why is so important. Why is their job important? Why is this new project that they're already feeling overloaded and you just come in, you're all excited, you've already thought it through, but they're like, hey, my plate's really full. But if you explain the why, they're probably going to have a better buy-in. And talk to them about feedback. How's it going to happen? Are you going to just do it during your once a year, if you have once a year, or quarterly reviews? Talk to them about how do they like to get feedback, and how performance is going to be measured. People want to know what to expect. I don't care if you're the CEO; they want to know from their board of directors what to expect. So don't surprise them. So, what was your best feedback that you ever got?
Someone who had worked in an organization longer than I am old told me that she felt appreciated for the first time working there.
That's great feedback. Yeah, because bosses like to get feedback too, so don't forget to give feedback to your bosses. I'm sure that did make you feel good. So I remember when I was first starting out at GM and I got my performance evaluation and I asked him why the rating, because I thought I accomplished all the objectives. He said, well, you're new, so I can only give you this rating. So instead of having a discussion with him in my immature state, I wrote like a 3-page rebuttal of everything that I accomplished and why it should have been higher. And when he got it, I think he was a little surprised, but it led to a good discussion, because I said, really what I wanted to know is what can I do better? This didn't give me any feedback. So feedback usually gives us some kind of signal on what do we need to do more of, less of, start doing, stop doing. So feedback is really important. So one-on-one communications, a couple of you have already talked about it, expressing appreciation. Ask them to share their interests and goals and share your vision about how you would like to work together. This is going to be really important for the peers that you're friends with. And there's a continuum of friendship. So it might be somebody that you went to lunch with, or it might be somebody that you've worked together for 30 years and you're like godparents to each other's kids. I mean, that's like, there's a continuum of friendship. So you really need to talk about what are those boundaries going to be? What's going to be different about when you work together? So has anybody had to have one of those discussions? Is there other things that you ought to add to that? Who's had to supervise a close friend? Anyone that they worked with? It can be tough. You need to be really clear up front on both sides. And then there's the disappointed contender. Like the gentleman who wanted my position. I mean, acknowledge their disappointment. You shouldn't apologize that you got the job, and give them time to adjust. Maybe you just need to back off, because change is hard for anybody. Make it clear you value them, you want to support their development. What do they want to learn? So what if they don't adjust? In your case, that person left, which was good. But what if they don't adjust? What do? Come on, we got a bunch of leaders in here.
Well, first you talk to them, right? You try to get to know them, and then can you fire them if they're a fly, right?
Yeah. What?
I mean, you gotta set a plan for, what they need
Yeah.
to do to either improve or what the consequences will be if they don't. So, I mean, you gotta give a growth plan.
Yeah.
Or what if you gave them a promotion? I gave them something more to do. I give them more experience, more responsibility to see if they fail on that and say, see,
That sometimes happens, but when that comes to another department and everybody knows, it's like you just dump somebody. It doesn't usually work. Leanne, you're Lori, sorry, longtime HR director. I'm sure you've had people come to you with this situation. Give us some of your insights. What would you tell them to do?
I'm not good on the spot, but I think Doug, who's up here at row, you know, if someone was not adjusting to that situation, you know, we would formally sit down and say, okay, you know, what can we do? Here's where we need to get to. Here's the end goal. What steps do we need to get there? You know, I hate to say an improvement plan, but in the end, it will come to that, right?
Right.
So we have, you know, 30, 60, 90 days to get this back on track. But I think the empathy, I think there's got to be respect for the manager, and that's, you know, their responsibility to build that respect. You're way more accountable.
Right.
Like you said, you're under a different lens, right? And so it's kind of you got to earn that respect from your team, be accountable to them. You know, I think it's do what you say you're gonna do, right? Because as soon as you don't, right? They're like, what is all this for? But in that situation where somebody's struggling or there's issues between the employee and the new manager, we would, if it came to me, we would sit down and have some honest conversations, and those are difficult to have, but we always have a plan in place, right? What are the outcomes? Where do we need to get to? Here's how we're gonna do it.
Right.
And then we watch it closely and pay particular attention, and more often than not, they work out.
Right.
If it's like a technical ability, that comes to the forefront right away, and we're able to manage that a little bit better.
Yeah.
through
So,
training or whatever.
sorry to put you on the spot, Lori, but she's right. Reach out, and I picked out, because I know Lori's HR director, and reach out to your HR department if you have it. Don't feel like you got to tackle it on your own. It's always helpful because HR sees those situations a lot. So see if they can provide some help to you and maybe, you know, prevent some of the stumbles. Just to get that other sounding board, and they can guide you. Or like Stephanie said, we can, you know, fire them. But that's when we get into legal. That's when HR says, hey, whoa, stop, because you don't want to have a legal case. Bree.
I just want to point out something that Lori mentioned. Lori, you made the comment, I hate to say an improvement plan, and I think that's a big misconception with performance improvement plans, is that they're meant to be punitive, but really it can just be a tool to use to keep lines of communication open and work towards that end goal, so.
Yeah, they're more, sometimes they're developmental, sometimes they're really tactical, but most of the time, you know, I think both parties, or if there's three, you know, depending on the team structure, they walk out of there feeling, like you said, at least the expectations are set at that point. There's no more guessing. They understand, you know, everybody's place in that situation, and you kind of, you know, then it's on you. It's on the manager, it's on the employee. You know what the end goal is going to be, and either you get there or you don't, and, you know, you manage it that way. But most of the time it's communication. A lot of times, I shouldn't say most of the time, a lot of times it's the communication piece, and everyone in this room knows that it's one of the hardest parts to accomplish. And so sometimes it's just miscommunication, perception, personality, you know, preferences, you know, personality assessments help sometimes in those situations. So, but like Brianna said, you know, you should go into it like, we're going to make this right. We're going to fix it in the next, you know, 3 to 6 months. It's developmental. Most of the time it's if there's the technical abilities not there, like I said, and that's a little easier, more tangible to focus on.
Right. And many times it can be a positive outcome, you know, to turn that around, because, and one of the things that I'll just throw a tip in for HR, we love documentation, you know, that just helps us. And not to document it for the person so they feel like you're, you know, micromanaging, but it's important for them too. It's like to have something written in a plan to know what the outcomes should be and what's expected.
Yeah, and those are, I think you bring up a good point, because you hear what you want to hear sometimes. Those are not comfortable conversations, so you kind of go in with a predisposition, right? And so if you walk away from those meetings and you reread it or whatever, and so when you get to that point, that documentation or that paperwork or that schedule or you know, those set times or those milestones are good to go back and reflect on it, because you hear different things. You know, you kind of just can't wait for the meeting to be over, right? You miss a lot of the, you know, where do we need to be at the end of this? So
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So just again, a couple reminders about supervising the former peers, establish boundaries. Stay friendly. You don't have to all of a sudden become this ogre because now you're over your peers and, do what I say. And you need to still be the same person, but be clear about what you're expecting. And understand your words have more weight. Everything you say. It's like, the E.F. Hutton, which was a really old commercial, E.F. Hutton, everyone listens. Well, people are listening. They're looking at your expressions. They're looking to see if doors are closed. Uh-oh, there's a lot of doors closed. What's going on in the company? So everything's being watched. So just be conscious of that. Don't start making major changes immediately. I like what you said about, sometimes you need to start on that listening tour and just step back. Certainly you were there, put in place to do certain things and accomplish certain goals, but don't go in day one and I'm changing everyone's schedule, I'm doing this. You don't even know what the team's been through. So having a team meeting and sharing, here's what my expectations, here's what I was told, that we need to get accomplished. Find out what they expect of you. The question about can we still be friends? Some people say, nope, you can't. I don't think it's that easy of a yes or no answer. Most everybody agrees the relationship probably has to change, but I think it's possible to remain friends with somebody as long as you're both mature about it. Because obviously if you've worked in companies, a lot of times your friends come from the people you work with. So if you've worked there a long time, you have a lot of friends, that doesn't mean that you have to stop being friends. But what would you say, give me an example of some things you might request of your friend if you're having a discussion about, hey, since I got the promotion, my role's going to change, things may change between us. What would you like to hear from that supervisor who is also your best friend perhaps? What would you like to hear from them? What do you think the rules or boundaries should be?
Be my partner in success.
Absolutely. Great opportunity to be.
Yours and mine.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, so it's a chance for you to be an advocate for them and for development for them. It doesn't mean you're going to stop necessarily being the friend. Problems that can occur, taking advantage of the friendship. If you see that happening, you got to say to the person, it's like, both our roles, that's unfair to ask. And really, a good friend would not ask you to give up confidential information. Because if you are supervising somebody that you hang out with on the weekends or you play softball with, people are already going to have that perception. Oh, I bet, Stephanie's got the inside scoop. Talk to Stephanie. She goes out with the boss on the weekends, and make sure you can see if you can fish around and see what's going on. A good friend's not going to do that. They need to respect the boundaries because there's going to be a perception of favoritism, perceived or not. There's going to be that perception. And then sabotaging behaviors. Maybe your friend doesn't like that they got an assignment or a project, so they're kind of talking about you. Again, is that really a friend? And they're going to maybe test your authority and maybe have an attitude. So what are some things that you've done when you've supervised a friend? Have you had a situation that you could share?
Mine's not a successful because I didn't know all this at the time. I worked at the theater. I had to go from being the candy striper, then they got me up to the ticket booth, and then I had to become the supervisor of all of them and tell them to shh, be quiet. And that was really hard. They were like, what are you doing? Come out here and telling me to be quiet. We were just talking to me yesterday, so it was difficult. I wish I'd had all this stuff would have been better because I asked this to go back to being my ticket taker job. I didn't like the supervisor. I didn't like what I was doing, so.
Yeah, it can be hard. It's like if you have brothers and sisters. I was the oldest in my family, and my brothers and sisters would always tell me, "You're bossy. We don't have to listen to you." That can happen with the supervisor-friend situation, and it's difficult. But you got to have that discussion. And again, it goes back to the why. Why were you asking them to do that? To be quiet?
Because my manager said, go out there and tell them to be quiet.
Yeah.
So.
Probably so the patrons could enjoy the show.
Correct, sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was a why.
Having seen this, I could have said, hey guys, I enjoyed talking to you, but we really gotta be quiet for them.
Right.
Keep our jobs.
Exactly.
Nothing.
I like it. So, can you still go to happy hour? What do you think? How many people think you can still go to happy hour with the? Don't be afraid to raise your hand. I mean, I think we comment.
Yes and no, like, if you're gonna go to happy hour with them, don't be a regular there, maybe go once in a while.
Yeah.
Because if they're there to blow off steam, they don't want the boss hanging around too.
Right.
But if you go, they'll be on their better behavior, and then follow those rules.
Yeah, if you go, I mean, nobody wants to see their boss up on the bar with a lampshade on their head. I mean, I have had stories, and I'm sure Lori's had stories over the course of her career, not at Roe, but where people come in and their boss got out of control at the party. I've seen people get demoted, lose their jobs. One guy was not very smart, was dancing with the boss's wife and had his hand on her backside, and he didn't last in the company. I mean, should he have been fired for that? Well, maybe not, but you put yourself in uncomfortable situations. So I like your idea about going and being friendly, but then leave, because your coworkers want an event. They don't want you to sit there. They need their own time, and leave before everybody else. I was coaching a director at a hospital in Detroit, and we did the 360. And to a person, everybody thought he had a relationship with one of his female employees. Why? Because he only went to lunch with her. He didn't go to lunch with anybody else. And she had a child that was sick, and I don't really think anything was going on, but the perception was there. And it's like, so why don't you invite other people? Why don't you go to lunch with other people? And so when I gave him that feedback, he was shocked that people would think that. But again, everybody's watching you. And, sometimes people's lives are boring, so they might be making up their own story because it sounds good. I mean, all you have to do is look at the gossip. As you're standing in the grocery line, people will just make up stuff. So absence the information, they might be making up a story. Yes?
I tell myself that what other people think or say about me is not my business.
Yeah, I don't know who said that quote, but I love that. But when you are the boss, I think you need to consider the perception that she was the favorite. If she's getting the higher raises, like I said, she had a really sick child. He was trying to provide eventing. And so once he was aware of it, not that he stopped doing that, but he started including other people. And plus, he wasn't having his one-on-ones with people. I definitely recommend having one-on-ones, whether you do it once a month or once a week, just to check in with people. So because he's only going to lunch with her and he wasn't having one-on-ones with other people, he just was creating a snowball effect of problems and stories that were being created.
If I were the boss, I'd want to know what they were saying. I'd want to know what the perception was. So I would welcome that, have somebody like you come in and talk to everybody.
Yeah, that is helpful why they do 360s. And one thing that I will tell you, that if your friend is working for you, don't leverage your friend to say, hey, what's the rest of the team saying about me? That is abusing your power too, because that's none of your business either. Exactly, I love your quote. So building trust with your former peers, or if it's new employees, share your intentions as a leader, ensure your goals are clear, recognize those accomplishments, whether they be small or large. I mean, to your story back there about that lady saying, I feel appreciated. I mean, wow. And it probably wasn't anything big you did, but you saw her and maybe saw what she was doing and how it helped the company.
Sometimes just simply telling somebody you appreciate what they do is all it takes.
Yep, just a thank you. You also got to hold people accountable when you don't. What does it do to the rest of your team? Sometimes the good performers get all the work, and the people that aren't stepping up and doing the job, that just causes really bad feelings in your team. So you got to hold everybody accountable. And don't micromanage. Don't tell them, I want you to do this, but I'm going to tell you how to do it, when to do it. I mean, everybody has their own style, and you know what? They might have a better outcome than you. And then seek feedback from your team. After you've been on the job for a month, How do you think things are going? If you could give one piece of advice for me, what would it be? Maybe you don't like hearing what they're saying, but don't take it personally. There's a lot of leadership training that is done with horses. Anybody heard of that? We've got, Bree knows about it because we've got a couple of coaches that do that kind of training. And you say, well, I don't even like horses. But once you bring a team to work with horses are extremely sensitive animals, and it takes a while to build trust with them. I'm not saying people are horses, obviously, but
The backside of the horse.
yeah, the backside, right. But actually, having gone through this several times with groups, I mean, it's really amazing how people go about building that trust with the horse. Some people are over there just yapping and talking in the horse's ear, and you're not allowed to bring food. You're not allowed to cheat. And so some people just give the horse some space. They might, brush it or whatever. It's interesting to see what people do to start building that trust. And once they feel like they've built enough trust, you've got to get this horse to go through a walking course. And it's just interesting to see what happens, because horses know if you're scared of them, or, they are very sensitive animals. So even if you look up a YouTube video of it, it's really interesting. So trust builds over time. What are trust busters for you? What busts your trust?
Usually lies to you. Plan on-
Lies. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a big one for me. Other people, what's a trust buster for you? Don't follow through. Like you were saying, Lori, about it, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And there's been times when I failed to maybe meet a deadline, and I've got to say to the person, I apologize. I told you I'd get you this. Is it okay if I get it to you tomorrow? I had a boss who said, he didn't like surprises. So if you're going to not meet the deadline, you better tell me well ahead of time. Don't tell me like at the deadline. So maybe they can make adjustments.
Hiding or covering up mistakes.
Yep. Leaders make mistakes all the time. I mean, hopefully they're not as major, but they make them all the time. So I'll tell you one when I was young in my career that happened to me. So the old AC plant over on Dort Highway used to be filled with people. We had almost 10,000 people at the time. And we were in a huge cost cutting. Things were going downhill fast. And as the HR director, I had the safety team, and we had 4 safety stations. And if you remember the old AC plants, there used to be streets between them. So it was a pretty big facility. We were going to consolidate the first aid stations because we said, well, the staff talk, we're within, half a mile of the fire station, all these things. So we thought we had talked it through. We talked with the union. We thought everybody was on board. And one day when the leadership team was off at the Holiday Inn doing a meeting, it's the days of beepers. So this was a long time ago. The 911 goes off, and it's like, what the heck? So we call back to the plant. By the time we get back to the plant, which didn't take long, there was fire trucks, TV trucks. A group of employees, well-intentioned, who are first responders, decided that they needed proof themselves whether or not this plan could work. Unfortunately, the guy who was at the security desk forgot that it was a drill and called it into 911. It gets worse. The plant doctor forgot it was a drill and got the paddles out, and they had staged somebody being down and paddled somebody. It made the front page of the Flint Journal. I got calls from the CEO of the company down in Detroit. I mean, it was awful. And even though there was other people involved, at the end of the day, I had the safety team, I had the first responders, the buck fell with me. We ended up having meetings on all 3 shifts, explaining what we could have done better. Obviously, those employees didn't feel comfortable. They were well-intentioned, and they all had access to, the makeup and the blood and everything, but what a catastrophe. So I still went on with my career. I didn't get fired, but hopefully none of you will make a mistake of that magnitude. But the lesson, my takeaway was, you can never communicate a big change enough. When you've got a change going, usually the leaders have thought through it, talked about it. But the people that are maybe executing the change or feel like the change is being done to them, they're not on board with you. So you really need to, they say you should repeat things at least 7 times, but talk about a lesson that I would never, ever, ever forget. It was that one. So you can come back from mistakes. Luckily, nobody died, got hurt, or anything, but certainly it got a lot of emotion out because the person that, the friend of the person that was down thought their friend died. So it was a pretty traumatic week in my life, one I'll never forget. But again, you can come back from mistakes. Hopefully I'm sharing that because when you have a change, people don't like change. Everybody that came in here sat with somebody they knew if they came with somebody else of their company. If they didn't, they scoped out the room and decided what their seat was going to be. People don't like change. And I bet if I gave you a quick restroom break, because I see some people itching around, I know it's morning coffee goes through people, I would bet you're going to come back and sit in the exact same seat because we don't like change, So with that, why don't we just take a quick bathroom break if anybody needs it. You want to get another donut, refresh your coffee, and then we'll get going and wrap up here. All right, I think we got everyone back. All right, so we got about 20 minutes left. I want to breeze through some of these slides and make sure we save time for questions. Reinforcing good performance, catching people doing something right. It might just be their everyday job. It might be your receptionist. Hey, I really appreciate about how friendly you are to our visitors. They've commented on it. Whatever it is, you can catch them doing something right. That's going to build trust. And you want it to be sincere. You don't want to overdo it, but you want it to be sincere. I mean, it helps the employee feel appreciated. Their self-esteem grows. It's contagious. The team morale grows. But, look for catching people doing the right things. Definitely something that can help, build trust with your employees. It's just a matter of maybe they do a really mundane job, but it's like, I see you. I see what you're doing. I'm sure, it doesn't matter what your industry, you can find people doing something right. So building your leadership toolbox. So these are just some things, Lori had mentioned self-awareness. I mean, for the people that go through the Lead Now program, they do some assessments like DISC, Myers-Briggs is one that I like. There's all kinds of self-aware, and there's free ones online a lot of times that you can do if it's not the formal one. They're fairly close if your company doesn't do it. But the more you can learn about yourself, what your preferences are, what your motivations are, the better off you're going to be as a leader. Know what makes you tick so you can help understand what makes others tick. And then work on trust. Change management. There's all kinds of free training. I'm going to go over some of it. Delivering effective feedback, communications. How do you motivate people? Influence is a big one. Yeah, you're the boss. You've got the power. You can tell them what to do. But influence is a better way to do it because you're going to have to influence your other peers too, maybe different departments. Meaningful recognition. So it's funny, I did a 360 getting feedback and this guy never gave any recognition to his team. So I said, you may want to talk to him about what you learned in this 360 because if you just go out randomly recognizing people, they're going to go, what is wrong with the boss? Because he never gave a thank you, much less a good word or appreciate. So he's like, well, why do I need to do that? He was pretty resistant to it. I said, well, what's your concern? Well, then they're going to be looking for it. I said, well, what would be the benefit if they're looking for it? Well, I guess it would hold me accountable. So, as a boss, if you're working on something, especially a new boss, maybe you're having problems with delegation. Might share it with your team. Hey, I used to do a lot of these things. I know I'm going to need to let go of them because it's comfort level. Something that you know how to do with your eyes closed. Maybe you want to hang on to, but let it go. Let it go. Ask for your people. Hey, I'm trying to do a better job of delegating. If there's things that you want to take on, let me know. If I'm not delegating enough, let me know. There's some people who are going to say, stop with the delegation, but give the people a chance. It helps them grow. And then resolving conflict is a big one. There's a lot of tools about learning what your conflict style is. You know, are you somebody who likes to confront? Are you an avoidance person? Like I said, the avoidance might be a good style if it's something small, but if you're avoiding a big problem, it's just going to get bigger. And then emotional intelligence. There is a book that I have on the reference list that's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. The thing I like about it, it has one of those scratch-off codes. You can take the assessment, and it also shows you how you rank with other people. And then you can go back 6 months later and take it again to see what you've done as far as progress. So being emotionally intelligent, if you don't have any other reason to learn more about it, they say that people who lead with more emotional intelligence make more money. So maybe that catches your ear. It's something that is part of the Lead Now classes. They talk a lot about emotional intelligence. And then performance management. Nobody likes to do it. But it's critical. How else are people going to get feedback? Or if people need a development plan, there's all kinds of free things out there that can teach you on how to give feedback and performance management. And then build your business and financial acumen. Just because you're in HR doesn't mean you should know about the rest of the business, because you'll be a better HR partner if you understand the business's goals. Just because you're in finance doesn't mean that you don't want to learn about benefits. Like I asked my CFO one time, how do you know so much about benefits? Well, the chief financial officer, there's a magazine called CFO, and they write articles about benefits and the cost of HR. So he was always in my business. So I thought, I think I'm going to get a copy of that CFO magazine so I see what he's looking at so I can be better prepared. But make sure that you're getting outside of the business. The more you understand other parts of the business, the better leader that you're going to be. And encourage your people to do that. Maybe it's a job shadow. So leadership training, if there's company sponsored, take it. Obviously, all the people are here today, your company supported you. If there's no company leadership, create your own. Select just one or two areas that you want to focus on. Don't try to go back in this list and try to be an expert in all this. You know where there's some areas that maybe you're not comfortable with. Pick one or two. You know, there's courses at the chamber. Bree's always happy to talk to people or recommend classes. Read leadership books. If you don't like reading books, there's audio books. There's, Blink List, which takes a book and consolidates it into 15 minutes. There's all kinds of ways to get the information. There's online courses that are often free. Plenty of YouTube videos. Just put in new leader or managing peers and see what pops up. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there. And I've put a couple things in the reference list. And then podcast. I put a couple of my favorite podcasts in there that I like to follow. Talked about the self-awareness. TED Talks. If you haven't listened to those, they're short, usually 20-minute talks. Find a mentor or peer mentor. Maybe it's somebody who's had the job. Maybe it's somebody outside of work. And they've probably had those experiences. All kinds of leadership blogs. You don't want to spend all your time doing this so you can still lead, but what are the one or two things that you want to get better at? And then find one of these resources. Some people are visual. Some people like to read. Other people like to listen. Some people like the short version. Whatever it is. And even when you're watching movies, there's so many leadership lessons in movies. Building those relationships with your new peers, with the other departments, because you're going to be partnering with other people. Maybe it's internal and external customers. Find out, what do they need from you? What makes you a good partner? What makes HR a good partner with operations? What do they need? Nobody succeeds, so don't ignore those crucial relationships. Most people fail more than any other reason because of poor relationship skills. All you have to do is look at the newspaper, and they say CEOs on average last 12 to 18 months. That's kind of scary, that they are failing that quickly. And think about what a tough job that is to maybe jump into a new company. You got all kinds of levels of leadership. You got to learn the culture. It's a challenging job. But make sure that you're building those relationships. So everybody has a different style. I once worked for a plant manager who everybody said, why is that guy so stuck on himself? He doesn't even speak. When I brought it to his attention, I said, Jim, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of times when you're at the hall, maybe you're preoccupied, but people are wanting to interact with you. It's like, I didn't even see that guy. So don't assume, about other personalities, because we all have our own styles, but it's helpful if you do notice something to be able to share that with your people, with that feedback. And he really turned around and tried to make a more conscious effort, but nobody had ever brought it to his attention. He was just an introvert and very into thinking about the next thing, and it was like tunnel vision to him. So I guess in summary, it's like, be you, be confident. Everybody's unique. Don't try to be, when you follow somebody, nobody likes to hear, well, so-and-so used to do it that way. Be confident. You're going to make mistakes. Learn from them. Everybody makes them. Seek feedback early so you can, adjust. And don't forget to practice self-care. It's like sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you're a new leader. It's like, oh, I got to learn all this stuff. You got plenty of time to learn it. You got a lifetime. So make sure you balance that. And the best advice my dad ever said is, you are the CEO of your own career and development. You know what you need to work on. Don't wait for your boss to tell you need to develop something in yourself. Take charge of it yourself. So quickly on the recommended, thanks everyone for sharing, the recommended reading. If you're a new person, I love this Coaching for Leaders podcast. If you pick that episode, it's really a good one. I talked about emotional intelligence. Bree's gonna raffle off, or I don't know how she's gonna give away her book. Managing former peers. There's 16 leadership tips. Lots of good stuff on there. Thanks for the feedback. I really love that book. That was part of Crucial Conversations, the original authors. Anything by John Maxwell, I love him as a leadership author. First 90 Days. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team talks about the things that you need, that, it's got communication, trust. You need all those things to get to the top for results. Another podcast I've really been enjoying is The Look and Sound Leadership. They're more entertaining because a lot of them have acting backgrounds, and what got you here won't get you there. If you've been a leader for a while, see if you have any of those 20 bad habits that we all have. Thank you for your participation.
You did a great job.
Thanks.